Hey there, my name is Abby West, and I'm a product manager here at Looker. At Looker, we move pretty quickly, releasing a new version of Looker every 4 weeks. That means there's a lot of new features that come out that you might not have had a chance to play with yet. So we wanted to put together a video to review the last 3 releases, the ones that came out over the course of Q4 last year. Those are Looker release 332, 334, and 336. Those came out in October, November, and December of 2015. And we wanted to cover a few key features in those releases, just in case you happen to miss them. The first feature I want to go over is one that applies to all dashboards that were created through the user interface. That means you made a look and then you saved it to a dashboard as opposed to coding it up in LookML. These dashboards now take advantage of a new feature called newspaper layout. In the old world, dashboard tiles were required to sit all on the same line, and the space between them was divided evenly between the number of elements. You can see rows had different heights, but they're all evenly spaced. In the new world, you can configure dashboard elements however you'd like. You can make them smaller, you can make them larger, you can change their heights, you can change how many are on a line. It's much more configurable to the way that you want to present data for your company. Okay, let's take a look at the new Add Edit Filters modal. It's another new feature on dashboards right now. So when we click into here, we can see an entirely new interface. And we have the ability to toggle between different filters that we've already configured for this dashboard, as well as seeing a different layout for how we configure those filters. So you can see which elements they apply to. You can name the filter, you can select what kind of filter it is. The main difference on this particular filter, when you click into it, it will offer you suggestions from the field that you've specified. Or if you filter by something like a date or a string or number, you can just pass through a default value that will be pre-populated into the elements that it applies to. And if you want to add a new filter, you do that down here. So let's click out of here without saving any changes. We can also see the particular element filters that are applied on a per element basis by going to that elements gear button and hitting the edit applied filters. And here we can see it has both filters applied to it. You can actually toggle and configure those here, although we won't, but you have that opportunity if you want to. Let's actually apply some of these filters here and see how that impacts our dashboard. Before I click run here, I want to point out something that's going to happen. When I click run, you'll see that each individual element will gray out while it's being refreshed with the new filters applied, and it won't come back to being this sort of white, normal looking dashboard element until it's finished grabbing that new information. In addition, the run button is going to turn into a stop button, which we see right here. Okay, now we have all of our new data returned. So one other thing I want to cover quickly while we're on the dashboard still is if we have an embedded dashboard like we do in this case, we have added the opportunity for you to be able to download that entire dashboard as a PDF and also download the particular data from an individual element. Okay, let's dig in now to an individual visualization so we can see some of the changes that have happened to visualizations on the Explore page. The first change that I want to call out is our new color picker and our color palette. So if you go to the style button here, this one has a custom color palette set up. But if we go here, we can toggle between different ones. We could go to pastels, our Santa Cruz color palette. So we can really change how these visualizations look with the click of a button. The other thing that you can do is if you don't really like the first color, you can click around here. You can set this as you see fit. You can click out, it'll save. You can get rid of this entire color scheme if you want to just go to the next one in line. And you can also plug in your hex value if that's preferred. The other thing you can do is switch back to the old way and have hex values in here. You can both copy from here if you want to use the same colors elsewhere, or you can plug in your hex values if that's preferred. One other thing that comes along with changing the color values here is you can set one global color scheme for your entire instance, which is done by your admin in the admin panel right there on the front page. So that's a way to use your company colors or other favorite color palettes uniformly across your instance. Another change that we've made, if we are using, let's go to our x-axis, if we're using ordinal information instead of the automatic time-based information, and we were to make this area smaller, we're going to automatically adjust the number of tick marks we have here on the x-axis for you. So that's going to help you have a really good looking chart no matter what size you make it once you've put it on a dashboard. So you can see those changing as I give it more space. So I want to show you another new type of visualization, which is our new zoomable panel maps. So let's see some of the things we can do here. We can zoom in on our information and check it out at a closer range, you can see I'm getting more, it's easier for me to be able to tell where these lines are starting and ending. These are actually routes for flights, and they're color-coded. You can see my legend over here based on time percentage. So if the flight is 100% on time between 2 points, it's going to show up green. They're going to be yellow if they're kind of in the mid-range, and these lower performing ones are red down here. So you can see San Francisco to Santa Barbara appears to be quite delayed quite often. There's a lot of different configuration options over here, so we can fit our map to data to switch back out, to sort of zoom out and see everything. We can show things in points. We've got an automatic heat map option, which will sort of create boxes of information across your map and reconfigure the map for you. And you can change the colors of your legend, various other configuration options here. So you will need to use location data, latitude and longitude data, and the type location lookml parameter. But once you do that, you've got a lot of configuration options available to you. Let's go back to this chart to show some more new features on the Explore page. One new feature is this ability here to sort by row totals. You'll see I have this row total here, and I'm able to re-sort my entire chart based on a row total, which wasn't possible before. There's also some new changes in table calculations. You can actually sort those as well. And then we've added some new functions in here, including this idea of pivot row, which means you can access an individual row within a pivoted chart, which means you can do things like run aggregates over a pivot row, which didn't used to be possible. So take advantage of that. There's a lot of documentation there on Discourse. Okay, so once I've gotten this chart looking just the way that I want it to, there's a couple new options here in the gear menu here. One quick one that I want to show off. I'm going to save this. And if I want to make this public, I'm going to turn public access on, save it, and then I'm going to have all these options of ways to publicly share this chart that I've just made. And the one that's new is right here, this embed image. And that allows me to pop this over here in another tab and get a static image of the chart that I just rendered. Here's the static image of the chart that I've rendered. So now this is something that, I could post it on social media, I could share with colleagues in a different format, but different from a normal embedded image. It's not interactive. So if you don't want people to be able to toggle and configure things, or if you don't want them to be able to play with an image, you can now send a static image. Okay, so we'll turn that public access back off, save it, and click out. And the other change that we have in the gear menu here is our scheduling option. So if I want to schedule this to someone else, we have a whole host of more configurable scheduling options. So instead of just having day, week, month, we have now by minute, we have hourly, which means you can repeat every 4 hours if you want to. You can choose to only run during standard business hours. And we have all the same configuration options you had before in terms of how you're going to receive the look that you're scheduling. But this idea of having more configurable scheduling was a really popular one that we heard from folks. And we've added a lot of flexibility here in terms of how you're going to receive things. Okay, now we're going to jump into our LookML section here in developer mode and take a look at some new LookML changes. The first one I want to point out is the new quarter and quarter of year time frame. These can be made as part of a dimension group or as standalone dimensions, as any time frame can be. And if we choose to explore orders and we want to look at these new time frames, we can look up quarter here. Let's just do a count of orders, and we run that. And we can see we've broken out the past few years that we have data for by quarter and given the count of orders for every quarter. We can filter on this. You could say in the past 2 quarters, for example, rerun that. And you could filter in any other way that you'd like. We can also look at the quarter of year time frame. Let's take our filter away, run that. And that shows us, these are of course sortable, these show us over the 4 quarters of a year overall, all years combined, what is our performance like, and that can be visualized and anything else. Great new dimension there. Another new parameter that we have is this suggest persist for. So if we go back to our explore, we know that when we filter on certain fields, we get these suggestions here. Looker will, by default, cache your suggestions, these options here, for 6 hours. But if you want to change that, here, for example, you can use this suggest persist for parameter, and that takes any number, numerical value, and then seconds, minutes, or hours. Next new parameter that I want to point out is this full suggestions true. So what this does is, in a case where you have access filters enabled and there are certain fields that you only want suggestions to appear on based on your access filters, you use this full suggestions true, and then when you explore that particular field, it'll only give you suggestions that are permissible per the access filters that you have enabled, which is really important in a lot of embed use cases. And finally, one more parameter that I'm not going to demonstrate here, but that I want to mention is, for those of you who use a Redshift database, you now have this option of distribution style even or all. And Looker will start to default to all. It's a legacy feature, so you can enable that in your legacy features panel in the admin section, but this controls how nodes are utilized in Redshift when building a drive table, for example. So when you're creating your drive tables, you can take advantage of this new dist style parameter, all or even, which is not compatible with dist keys if you have those enabled. So it's just something to be aware of. And if you want more information on this, you can of course look on discourse.looker.com or read some more information in our docs. So now I'm going to go back to this query that we have here, and I'm going to open this in our SQL runner to show you some new features of our brand new modified SQL runner. So this is a new interface you'll notice first and foremost. And here we've pulled in a SQL query. We can run this, and you'll notice we have collapsible sections here, which can give you more space to get to write longer queries or to have longer result sets. We've added in a connection kind of explorer. This mimics the field picker on the explore page, where you can browse connections, you can browse schemas within connections, and the tables within those schemas. You can see the same options that we had before as sort of buttons across the top of the screen. These are now all in a gear menu on each table. And if we open up one of these tables, we can also see information about each one of the fields within that table. And that it'll give you things like their most common value and also what type of field they are. Furthermore, we have a history tab. So if we click through here, this will actually bring up prior queries. So you can kind of browse and save the queries that you've already run. And you can also share the URL from any of these queries with a friend or colleague, and it will bring you right back to the SQL query. It won't run it when you share. You'll have to click run yourself, so that kind of protects your database, but it will save that SQL that you've written out. One last feature that I want to point out from here, and I have to exit developer mode to take advantage of it. Okay, let's look at one of these other queries that we have in our history. I'll run this. And then another great feature that we have is this ability to explore straight from the SQL runner. So this is opening in an Explore window. I can kind of play around with this here. I can visualize it. I'm gonna need to change some, let's rerun this here. So I can visualize straight from the SQL runner. I won't be able to add this. I won't be able to save this directly to my spaces, but I will be able to add the view to a project if I want to use this as a drive table for some other analysis later, or I can keep playing around with this here and then share the URL. So another colleague of mine will be able to come back to this visualization that I might have derived from my SQL runner. So those are some of the new features of Q4. We hope you enjoy them, and check back in a few months for our next set of updates. Thanks a lot.